All right, welcome back to part 2 of the graveyard of Bukitsa Mu. Hard word to say. We are continuing from where we left off in part 1. As you may recall, we had just finished with our first act, and I need to put a check mark there, forgot that. I am recording this on the same day. It's been about half an hour to an hour. I gave myself a few minutes of rest. In that time, it has started to rain, so if you hear the sound of rain on the window or thunder, have no worries. As for the graveyard of Bukitsa Mu, when last we left off, Commander Sarah Paulsen and her two crew members, Petty Officer Chloe Bassett and Lieutenant Eric DeWitt, had just beamed down to the site of a wreckage that they had been prohibited from viewing by the Queen of Bukitsa Mu, Queen Teato. Their goal here in the second act, which should be this entire video, is to determine what is going on, why the monarchy is not sharing information with the local population, and why they didn't want anyone from Starfleet inside to see what's going on. And as a reminder, I don't have a whole lot of information as to what's going on. In fact, I can show you... let's see, I'll just take a quick screenshot here and show you all of the details I have on this mission. Let's bring this over here. This is all that I've got. Literally everything I know about what's going on is right here. So everything we're doing is based on ad-libbing and where the dice take us. So as we push forward, we are going to go back to page 328, which is our handy quick reference table. And we're going to continue with the core game loop. We know that Commander Paulsen and her two comrades have just beamed down through heavy transporter jammer interference, and now I think it's a perfect time. They need to sneak on the ship. The ship is heavily guarded, especially at the entrance, and this is a good time for the trio to try and sneak aboard. So in this instance, I don't think it's still daytime, so I think we are good to avoid any security locks on the outside, but there are a couple of security officers who are carefully watching with disruptor rifles. So this is a perfect time to do what in something like Dungeons and Dragons would be a stealth check. In this case, I think there's an argument that could be made for either control security or fitness security. But I think for Commander Paulsen, she's not going to be as athletic about it and is going to try to be more precise with her motions. So we'll do control security. I could also see an argument to be made, we might end up with another task in the middle if this one fails where she has to talk her way out of it. Or they might get into a fight. We'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and roll my 2d20, and we are shooting for a 12 on our control security. Now, as you may recall, last time we had burned through both the momentum that we generated and the threat we generated. So we're starting with a clean slate. In the meantime, I did also generate some basic stats for both Petty Officer Bassett and Lieutenant DeWitt. So should the situation arise where I need to use them again, we will be capable of doing so a little more rigorously. So let's do it. All right, that's a 6 and a 4, which will in fact generate a momentum. I'll again use my Viking coin to let me know that we have a momentum generated. Let me get out my pencil and fill in the first slot on the tracker. So the camera will pan around and we will see Commander Paulsen and her two comrades kind of sneaking through a bit of a rocky canyon towards where they see what looks like an archaeological dig that has a handful of guards around. We see a number of alien creatures up on a ridge off in the distance, and as they approach, the way we're going to describe this, as I go and put in the check mark here as well. Commander Paulsen realizes that they need a distraction for the guards, and so she grabs a rock from near her and throws it. Again, control security. That's perfectly a reasonable interpretation. The rock makes some noise up on a ledge. The handful of officers that are standing around guarding the wreckage turn away, and gives the trio an opportunity to slip aboard. And I think this alien wreckage, what I'm picturing, is that this was some kind of colony ship. So where, actually, let's see. There's a nice little ship chart in here somewhere. They've got a nice thing, and I love this. In the only thing I don't love about this is that they call it matrices and not matrices. That bothers me. But they have a probability matrix for hit locations on ships, I believe. Let's see. Somewhere in here. System generation, system hit matrix. Here we go. All right. So where in the ship, in this colony ship, has cracked open enough that that people can get inside? Let's find out. 1. Okay, so it got hit in the sensor, or the communication sensors. So they're going to be entering through, I guess, the equivalent of a Jeffries tube that has been kind of opened to the atmosphere for easier access. And I think that works reasonably well. Let me get a quick drink of water here. All right, so that's originally what they see. I don't think we need a task for this, but a quick scan of the ship with a tricorder by Lieutenant DeWitt would reveal that the ship itself, based on the amount of degradation, there's also a nice little timetable. We can figure out how long it's been there. And we know roughly how long the ship has been down. It's been down probably for 800 or more years, but we want to see how much more. I think we're approaching it somewhere in here. And if I turn back now, I'm sure it'll be just above where I stopped. Alright, fine. Matrices, time. Let's see. Time intervals, 3:15. I must have passed it. Anyways, let's go ahead and roll on this. I think we're mainly looking for... We really just want a number. And none of these time intervals are particularly great for that. So we'll say... Yeah, we can adjust it a bit. We'll say a 1 is about the 800-year mark, and the 20 is an extra 500 years beyond that. So, and there are some implications that can be had from what this roll becomes. A 4, okay. So we know the graveyard was about 800 years ago when that disaster struck. So it's a safe assumption that this crashed maybe 5 years before that. I think that's fair. Yeah, on that scale, I think 5 years is fair. So this ship has been down for about 805 to 810 years, predating the war by about 5 years. Okay, so the three of them begin to work their way through the ship, and eventually they're going to find... this is a good point for another task. We can be a little bit quicker with this now that we know what's going on. They find a computer terminal that's written in some alien language, but a quick scan with the tricorder and the work of the universal translator, that's not a huge problem. All languages have, at least this is the Star Trek theory, is that all common languages, there are obviously some exceptions to this, but languages have have traits that are comparable, and that's what the universal translator uses to pick up on. If you've watched the most recent episode of Strange New Worlds, entitled, watched it yesterday, why can't I remember what it was called? Entitled Lost in Translation, you'll hear a good explanation of that in there. From Ensign Uhura. But in this case, we're going to need a check to see if Lieutenant DeWitt can break through. And I need to open up his character sheet. And in this case, I used the character generator, the default stuff from basic Star Trek Adventures. And in this case, all we have to do is ignore the talents. Those essentially don't do anything for us in the captain's log, nor does stress. I didn't give him any values. He's not important enough to need those, and we're not really going to look at his focuses either. I'm basically just using that for the life path generation for his attributes and his disciplines. Now, however, I didn't record his fitness and his presence. That's unfortunate. Oh, it did. Okay. A 9 and a 7. Interesting. In this case, I think we want it to be either control or reason with engineering. Either one would be a 14. So we'll have him try to get through the computer system. He has no focuses that would be relevant anyways, but it's a 14 for the roll. Okay, bad dice rolls continuing. We have failed and generated a threat, because I rolled an 18 and a 20. So we are off to a blazing start here in part 2. As he fails to... You know what? We're going to burn the threat right now. We're going to burn that threat right now. As he fails to get through the computer system, he also sets off an alarm, which has alerted someone to his presence. They have exited the part of the ship that's kind of the crawl space and are now in an actual... it's not exactly an airlock, but it's, let's say it's something like it. They're in a corridor that's basically just got a couple of doors, and the one door they tried, he couldn't break through the system. But there is a door at the other end of the hallway. So somebody has been alerted to their presence now. And that's what the threat comes from. Normally they would just have failed and have had to try and figure out another way around that. So now, not only are they in the wreckage without permission, they are known to be there in all likelihood. Maybe not them specifically, but someone is known to be there by the monarchy. Okay, so now what do we do next? Do they try and get through the door another way, or are we going to have an immediate encounter with enemies? Let's scroll back down to our yes/no probability matrix. I think it's unlikely that that a group of enemies would arrive immediately. So in this case, I think we'll call that improbable, and they likely have some time. So a 6 to a 20, they've got some time to try and get through the door another way. So let's see if we can figure out what's going on. 15. All right. So nobody's going to come on them right away, but that likely means that our fourth task, this act, which would be task 9 in total, will be a combat encounter. Somebody's going to come on them sooner than later. So we are back to trying to get through the door another way. I believe that we're still going to go with Lieutenant DeWitt. This time, I think we're going to have him try to get through jury-rig the door using some sort of engineering principle with the power systems. I think that's fair. In this case, if we used control engineering last time, let's use reason engineering this time, and we'll allow the focuses. I don't know that specifically there's any instructions on whether or not you can use focuses on NPCs. So that's something I'll check into before the next time I run Commander Paulsen. But in this case, it doesn't hurt. So, we are once again looking for a 14. A 3 or under, however, will generate multiple successes. That's a 9 and an 11, so we have 2 successes. I didn't use my momentum from last time. That's a shame. I should have thought of that. That's alright. That created some interesting results for us. But a 9 and an 11, we can't have more than 1 momentum. 2 successes, we're fine. They managed to get the door open. And at this point, we're about halfway through the mission. So we should see something here. This is the point of rising tension. Things should be ramping up to a point where either they have to be resolved or the situation's going to explode in their faces. And that resolution, either way it happens, will be in the third act. So, as we approach task 9 and task 10 here, we should see... I think they're... Okay, so here's what happens. I think I've got it figured out. The door opens, and they see a massive chamber that has, we'll say, it's a wide open space, but there are like hibernation pods on the sides of the walls and all across the floors. It's obviously a colony ship. And most of the pods from first glance are broken. You see cracked, transparent aluminum surfaces. Maybe not transparent aluminum, but it's the only clear surface I know in Star Trek. Cracked surfaces. There's signs of stains on the floor from liquids that have spilled out. Only a handful of pods at first glance, maybe 2 or 3 out of the 100 to 200 that are visible from the doorway, are not cracked and broken. And only one of them, I believe, would have been opened in a way that was safe to the inhabitant. But now getting back to that threat and the alert of someone coming up on them, a group of baddies has appeared. So we need to get into combat, and it has been a minute since I looked at the combat system here. Probability matrices. Let's see, there should be a good page on combat. Combat 203. Let's go see what we do. Alright, so we are under attack. We are essentially... They have simplified this beautifully. We don't have to worry about rolling what in the original Star Trek Adventures would be challenge dice. We're really just going to use the D20s and keep track. No worrying about stress, none of that. We do still have our momentum, so that can be huge here. Create hit tracks for each character. So we've got 3. And I'm going to roll a D20 and divide by 4. So there's a potential for there to be 1 to 5 security officers. We'll do a D20 divided by 4 plus 1, so 2 to 6. Who knows if that's good or bad for us? First time playing, we'll see. Okay, that is 5 total, so I rolled very high. Rolled a 16 plus, you divided by 4 plus 1, 5. Okay, so we need to create tracks. I'm just going to use a scratch piece of paper. In fact, I'll use the back of my mission tracker, and we will create tracks for everybody. So I'm not going to bother with boxes. Instead, I'm just going to do lines, blank line spaces. And then, who is our last officer? That is Bassett. 2 T's in Bassett. So this is the good guys, and I'm going to put a vertical line. I don't know the best way to do this yet. Hopefully we'll figure out what works and what doesn't over the course of these. I'm hoping that I will continue with this character and her time on the ship, but we'll see. So we're going to roll... I don't know... We want to stay on this chart. So I'm just going to roll and... see, okay. There are 2 male officers, 3 female, so we're just going to label male 1, male 2, female 1, female 2, female 3. And this is essentially just for my describing of what happens. It doesn't actually matter, but I like to add at least a little bit of variety and not the guard does this, the guard does that. Just a little bit of flavor in there helps. Okay, we've created hit tracks. I think the characters know that they're expecting trouble. I think DeWitt would have seen that he was detected through the system. So we are going to go ahead. We choose a character. We perform a task. If we succeed, we apply a hit. If we fail, we apply a hit to ourselves. And then we can do momentum and or threat. So... let's start with 1 hit if the opposition has the initiative. I don't think that's the case. I think this group does. They've got their phasers out. And in this case, we're going to start with Bassett. So let me pull up Bassett's character sheet. Once again, let me get these to the same level. There we go. So, Bassett has, you can't see all of that, but Bassett has an 11 Oh, that's him. Bassett has an 11 and a 4, so a 15 is what she's wanting to roll. I'm just going to write the sum of control security. And we'll probably end up with daring security. So Bassett's got a 15. Is her target number for pretty much anything she does here. DeWitt, on the other hand, has an 11 and a 3, so a 14. And if he does anything by hand, it's an 11. So we'll do that. And Paulsen, just to make this easier so I don't have to do a whole lot of referencing, has a 12. She is not the most versatile when it comes to combat. A 12 and an 11. So these are, the stats I'm giving are control security followed by daring security. So Bassett is going first. She's got a 15 regardless of what she does. So she is going to go ahead and take a shot at, we'll say there's a beefy looking Kitsan security officer up close and personal. And that is one success. The focus would come into play. Bassett has a focus in hand phasers. But she did not roll under her value of 4 on that. So that is one success. So we apply a hit to the opposition. We'll call that male 1 is the beefy dude. All right. Spend momentum and or threat. Add a hit to the opposition. Remove 1 hit. Create an advantage or cancel a threat. At the moment, we're going to hold on to our momentum. I have a feeling we're going to want it later. Track or tracks is not full. So we continue. And I believe what we see is the handful of security officers charging in, and Bassett immediately pulls her phaser and starts firing without waiting for anyone say so. Now, I believe that in combat here we alternate, at least that's how it works in the default Star Trek adventures. All right. We don't need to worry about that too much. We're in extended conflict, but that doesn't matter so much. And I think I'm gonna be fairly loose with what the enemy security officers can do. We're just gonna go in order, and we're gonna say they've got a 13. Say that their control security sum is a 13, so like a 9 and a 4, something like that. Seems pretty reasonable to me. And we're going to go ahead and have them target Bassett first. That is 2 successes. I don't think that does generate a threat. So I've now got 1 of each. The success adds a hit to Bassett. In this case, the hits are basically the characters just managing to get out of the way. It's not necessarily the best to call them a hit. It's how lucky are they in getting away. Their luck is eventually going to run out. That's a good way to think about it. So Bassett just manages to roll out of the way of a disruptor blast. Now we want to... I think I'm just going to burn the momentum to cancel the threat, because they would add a hit and I'm just going to remove the hit. So we're now back to even. All right, let's jump to DeWitt. DeWitt pulls his phaser and is going to also target the beefy male security officer with a 14. Drop that die. And he misses. I rolled 2 18s. So that is unfortunate. And he has a hit applied on him as he basically stands in the middle of this room and fires his phaser. He stands still for far too long and just barely manages to get away from a lethal blow. So this is already not going well for our heroes. We jump then to one of the female officers. She's kind of sneaking around trying to flank and is going to fire on Commander Paulsen, who is very clearly the leader of this group. She's kind of shouting orders and trying to get everybody to hide behind cover. So this, again, we'll go with a 13. That's a 15 and a 16, so she misses. As Paulsen notices her kind of sneaking around to the side and fires her phaser off in her direction. The security officer has to dive behind cover and lands a bit awkwardly. Now it's Paulsen's turn. And we're going to have her fire also on the first security officer. Try and target him as best they can. Okay, that is one success, so we'll mark that hit. But she generated a threat by rolling a 20. Okay, so what do we want to do with that threat? Next task is difficulty 2. Let's see. Actually, we're going to spend that threat right away and create a complication. Her phaser has been discharged. So she, for whatever reason, her phaser is not operating in this scenario. So she fires a shot off at the other security officer who's already been in a bit of a tangle with DeWitt and Bassett. Excuse me. And so her phaser is now dead. She's kind of holding it there, and she pointed it right at him. He knew that if she'd gotten her shot off, he would have been down. But he got lucky once again with this complication. Again, he's taken 2 hits, but that's how we're going to flavor it. Okay, we now get to the second male security officer, rolling for a 13. And he's going to target Bassett in recognizing her as a more challenging opponent. And he has rolled, in fact, a hit on Bassett. But there is no momentum or anything else to worry about there. As the next round starts, Bassett is going to throw her phaser to Commander Paulsen and is going to charge the beefy security officer, and using her skills in Susmana, we'll say, since she has an focus in hand-to-hand combat. There she is. Using her skills in Susmana, she's going to try and take down that big guy. Again, it's a 15 because it's daring and security. A 7 and a 19. So she does succeed and does manage to absolutely knock him out. And at this point, the security officers are probably going to start wondering... They haven't managed to take down anyone. Bassett's looking a little winded already. But she's now kind of crouched down next to the body of this the security officer who's merely unconscious. We're now going to the second female security officer, who probably also recognizes that Paulsen, while the leader, is also the least experienced in combat, and is going to take a shot at her. It's a 13 and a 15, so one success. So Paulsen gets hit for the first time. Or just avoids getting hit for the first time. Okay, we're going to go back to DeWitt, who's going to fire on the already injured female security officer. And that is a critical success. So that would generate a momentum. We're going to burn it right away. He had a 15 and a 1. So that would be 2 successes. We're going to burn the momentum that we'd get right away to stun her, because that would then put her to 3 wound. Awesome. The battle has turned for our enemies. Let's see. I'm going to have them roll the equivalent of a morale test. I don't know exactly what that be. Insight security, probably. So I don't think they're very good at that. Probably an 11. Let's see if they are aware that they are outmatched as far as skill is concerned. Not quite yet. I rolled a 9 and a 19, and I figure 2 successes would make them aware that they're not going to win this fight. So the fight goes on. I think that brings us to the last female security officer, who's going to target Bassett. That is a success with a threat. So with that threat, I think I'm just going to have her remove the hit so that does not end up working. So she fires her disruptor, and Bassett dives out of the way. Actually, we'll say this. Bassett quickly pulls the body of the beefy security guard that she just knocked out cold and uses him to block the blast. So that security guard is now dead. Not really Bassett's fault, but there might be words for her later. Okay. We're back to Paulsen, She's now got a phaser again. She's going to take a shot at the security officer who just tried to send a disruptor shot into Bassett. So that's female 3. That is 1 success. We will take that. That security officer dives out of the way once again. We are now back to the second male security officer. He's a little bit more of a wiry individual, has been more effectively utilizing cover. With Bassett being undercover, I think it doesn't really matter Paulsen and DeWitt, so I'm going to roll on the probability matrix. Again, 1 to 10, it'll be Paulsen, 11 to 20, DeWitt. That would be DeWitt, rolled another 20. So, he's going to take a shot. Dropping dice. That is 1 success, but again, he rolled a threat, rolled a 20. Rolling a lot of those today, so I'm just going to have that cancel out. That makes my life easier, and more likely that our group survives. So we're now... Excuse me for a second. Sorry. We're now going to have Bassett charge forward and go for the lady who just shot at her. Again, using melee, since she has tossed her phaser to Commander Paulsen. That is 2 successes. Using that momentum, she's going to knock out that security officer. And with that, let's see if the 2 remaining security officers are going to stand down. Yes, they are. Rolled a 1 and an 18 against that value of 11 that I had mentioned earlier. And the 2 security officers are going to stand down. And our crew are going to take a step forward, disarm them, and start taking a look around for some way to truss them up. Now, we have finished the scene. There are no injuries to worry about. So, we can just mark down a success on the mission tracker, which is fantastic. Now, we have one last task in this act. And I think as the crew start to look around the ship here, they probably would try and do some sort of test to figure out what's actually going on, what happened, what caused, if there was any sign that something had caused all of the issues. So I'm going to say probably some type of insight test. Insight isn't great for anybody, so maybe reason could also work. Reason science, maybe. Nobody's particularly good at medicine. I don't think. Eric DeWitt might be good at medicine. Yeah, he's pretty good at medicine. We might have Lieutenant DeWitt do a reason medicine or an insight medicine to check out the bodies. I think that would make sense. So we'll have him do that. And that was I just looked away. Reason medicine is a 14 for him. And I think that makes sense as they try and take a look at whatever remain, if there's any correlation between the bodies here and what might have happened on the planet. We rolled 3 successes, a 1 and an 8. Again, can only generate 1 momentum. With that momentum, though, I think we're going to give some extra information. And I think that fits narratively as we end this act. We will see that not only did this ship land around the same time as the war started, it probably caused the war. It looks like from records, and we'll use that momentum to kind of have them get into the ship's records and begin to translate them, especially now that they're not being harried by security officers. So the bodies, there's some sort of virus that's now dormant after 800 years within the bodies. And given the medicine check and what they know of the history, it seems like the vast majority of the deaths in this war were caused by what was at the time called a biological or chemical weapon. So it doesn't take the commander and the rest of her group very long to determine that somebody in the war had utilized the virus they found in the bodies here as a weapon to try and resolve things. And we'll use that momentum. This is the information they get from this. That with a little bit of digging into the ship's computers, they find one last log that was recorded before the ship's power went out that showed members of the Monarchy security force who had been supposedly neutral in the war. The Monarchy kind of stayed out of it, so to speak, but came out of the whole situation smelling like a rose and rather really solidifying their power in the planetary government. But they see in the logs member of the Monarchy's security force being responsible for finding the ship in the first place 800 years ago. And with that information, that's where we cut and would get into Act 3. And really that kind of sets us up nicely for how things are looking. You know, we had unrest between Rudolog, who is the opposition leader, and the whole situation seemed to stem from a dislike of the monarchic system this late in their societal development. They believe that they're beyond it for various reasons, and this information is going to cause a major stir. So we'll have to see in the next act how all of this shakes out. I hope you've enjoyed so far. The next act, I don't know if I'm going to manage to get to that tonight. I've got some other things to do. But there are certainly some big choices to be made in the near future, as well as potentially some serious ramifications for Bukitsa Mu. And I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining.